Hey there, welcome to my channel. My name is Linda. I've got a lot of fun. Why do I feel like I'm really turned sideways? What's the deal? Let's try it again. Hey there, welcome to my channel. My name is Linda. I've got a lot of fun DIYs coming your way. So what are we waiting for? Let's get started. Today we'll be making some Rustic Farmhouse fall pumpkins. So let's get started with project number 1. For this project, we're going to be using a pool noodle from Dollar Tree, and I'm going to cut the segments into 9-inch lengths. I'm going to use the little plastic serrated pool noodle knife you can get from Dollar Tree as well. It works wonderful for these. And I know we've all seen some kind of combination of using pool noodles for pumpkins, but I'm going to make a tall one. I haven't seen a tall one. I'm going to use Beacon Fabri-Tac glue to glue them all together. And when I was done cutting my 9-inch segments, I had about a little inch left over, and I'm kind of cutting it down a little bit smaller. We're going to use that later to hold our stem, so keep that little piece. And then just take your Fabri-Tac glue. I'm sure you can use hot glue on these. It's perfectly wonderful. And go ahead and glue your noodles together, trying to keep them a little bit even on the bottom. The top, it doesn't matter if one's a little taller than the other. You know, we'll cover it up with stuff and compensate for any kind of wonkiness on the top edge. And you can kind of see what shape I've got it in there. And this fabric I got from Etsy. It's a fluffy fabric, a rust color. I'll have a link down below for that. And I'm going to cut it about 11 inches wide. It'll be too long later. We'll worry about that in a little bit. Maybe 11.5 inches wide. Sorry about that. We'll worry about the length in a little bit. We're going to work with it long first, and then we'll cut off when we get to the end. And so basically, I'm just going to start kind of gluing on my pool noodles here, making sure I get glue nice and deep in between the pool noodles as well. So when you wrap it, you can really tuck it in there. You see me doing there, just tucking it in nicely. Okay, and we're going to do this process all the way around. And I'm tucking it in nicely in case you don't want to use twine like I'm going to do later to really kind of bring in that segmented pumpkin look. You know, it looks really nice just tucked in nice and tight in between those pool noodles as well. Okay, and you can, of course, use any fabric that you want. I just found this shop on Etsy, and I love the quality of the fabrics, and she has colors, and it's cute and puffy, and it's affordable. So I'm going to keep gluing all the way around, and then we'll get in and kind of cut off that excess because you see I still have quite a bit left. And you can use, if you want to use 2 pool noodles and make it a really big pumpkin, that's perfectly wonderful too. I just went with 1 pool noodle, you know, $1.25 makes 1 tall pumpkin. I cut off the excess of the fabric. I'll glue the rest of it on, of course, tucking into those pool noodles. I'm going to cut off about another inch or so. And what I love about this puffy fabric is as I glue it to the fabric already on there, and I kind of take my fingernails and run it across that puffiness and kind of blend it in, you know, kind of scruff it up a little bit, you barely, look at that, you barely even see the line. I will still make sure that's to the back, but you can barely see that differentiation. Is that a word? I'm going with it. Now I'm coming on the bottom, adding along the top and inside a little bit, and I'm going to glue my 2 loose ends together here on the fabric, and then I'm going to stretch over where I glued on those pool noodles and bring it right into the center. And I'm going to try to make it as flat as I can because this is the bottom and we want it to sit nice and flat, okay? So try to pull it nice and tight over those pool noodles, and then any excess can go into the inside. Now the top, I'm doing the same thing, but I'm not as concerned that it gets nice and flat on top because we're going to decorate it, we're going to add moss, that kind of thing. But the bottom, I wanted it kind of flat over those pool noodles so it sits flat. Now I have a really long upholstery needle and some really thick twine. You can get both of these at Walmart. Just take your needle up from the bottom through the center to the top, leave some of that twine, about 12 inches, hanging off out the bottom, and then wrap it around, go in between your pool noodles, and then bring it up through the center again, and you can use that extra thread at the bottom to help pull it tight, okay? And then take your needle up and over, around again, and through the center, and you're going to repeat this process coming in between all of your segments if you want twine through it. And you can see I just tied my twine around the needle. I'm not trying to get it through the hole. It was perfectly wonderful. I just made a little half knot. Now when you come to almost the last segment, go ahead and take that short end piece and your one piece left that you need to wrap around and tie a little knot, okay? And then just tuck that short end piece back into the center, and then just stay on the outside, okay? And then pull your twine up and over, right? And then take that twine and just bring it up underneath one of the other twines that you wrapped up and tied around. You see how I'm doing there? And then just tie a little knot. And then that excess twine, you can just tuck it in the middle. Don't need to worry about cutting it. So I hope that's all understandable. And now what I'm doing is I'm just gluing down the twine in between the center. This is optional. I just thought if I kind of glued it and tucked it in a little bit more between the pumpkins, it would give us even a more, you know, segmented look between the pool noodles, okay? Again, optional. And then the next thing I want to do is I want to add some weight to our pumpkin. So I'm on the bottom side. I'm using these little pieces, wood pieces from Dollar Tree. I end up using 2 because they're kind of short. Adding some glue around the outside of both edges. And what I'm going to do is take one and tuck it in on the bottom. Kind of just tuck it down, just stick it in there. And then take the other one, add a little glue on the top side, tuck that in. And then I'm going to flip my pumpkin over and take my long upholstery needle and push down on it so my wood touches the table. All right, and then I just cut a little piece of fuzzy to cover that wood, and that will give us some weight with those wood pieces so our pumpkin doesn't tip back and forth, because those pool noodles obviously are pretty lightweight. Now I just got a piece of stick from the backyard and I want to cover it. All right, and as you see there, I'm going to cover it with that thick twine we use for the segments on the pumpkin. And as you can see, I'm gluing it about, a ½ inch to an inch up. I'm leaving the bottom portion because we're going to take that bottom portion and tuck it into that little extra piece of pool noodle we had left over, right? So, and we'll do that in a minute. So I'm just taking that thick twine and I'm wrapping all the way around my stick just to give it a little bit more something so it's not just a stick poking up. And of course, I'm going to complete that process wrapping around all the way up to the top until my entire stick is covered. All right, finish that process. Glue that last little piece in. And then we're going to take this and add glue around that bottom portion that we didn't add any twine onto, stick it into our little piece, add some glue around the outside of that little pool noodle, and we're going to tuck that into the top. And like I said, that will hold our thing in, take up the space of the pool noodles, and now it's perfect. Now I'm going to add some moss around the edge, so it's going to kind of help cover up any pool noodle that maybe didn't get covered by the fabric or anything like that. I'm going to let it hang down the sides a little bit using my Fabri-Tac glue for this. You, of course, can use a hot glue gun, but just lay your moss how you want to lay it if you want moss at all. I like this moss I use from Walmart because it's a little bit more moisture. And then I have these curly cues. They came off of this acorn pick I got at Dollar Tree. It has great big curly cues on it. So I took a couple of those off and I'm going to tuck and glue those in right close to the stem. I like how this turns out. Like I said earlier, I've seen the pumpkins made out of short pool noodles, but I've not seen any made out of long pool noodles. And so I think we created something original here. I'm just kidding. So I have a wood leaf here. It came from a dried bundle of dried sticks and all that stuff you can get at like Hobby Lobby, and some burlap leaves you can get from Dollar Tree. And I just kind of took the burlap leaf and cut it down a little bit, sewed around it with orange thread just to, give it a little something. And then I'm just going to glue both of these in. You could just use all burlap leaves if you want, of course. And then I've got some phrases I've printed onto some fabric. Now, I've touched on this in our last few fall videos, how to do it. I'll go over it really quickly again in project number 2. But I'm cutting it down to fit my wood slice, but a little bit shorter so I see a little bit of wood slice around it. And then I just sewed around it with my sewing machine, some orange thread. I'm going to add some Distress Oxide ink and Vintage Photo around the edges so it kind of pops up off of that wood slice a little bit, and then I'll go ahead and glue that down. Perfect. And then I've got a twine bow here, just using that same twine we've been using on our pumpkin. I'm going to glue that down between the leaves. A little mesh tubing here from Dollar Tree. I like to take a short piece and tie it in a knot so it's easier to glue down. And then we'll go ahead and glue our wood slice down kind of right over the twine bow. And then I have got some pieces of pick that I pulled apart. It's got pine cones and pip berries on it. I'm doing a couple of those, and I'm gluing those in between the wood slice and the stem because I want to take up that space a little bit. We don't want our wood slice kind of hanging out over here in the air. Added another little bit of mesh tubing, and then I'm going to add a little bit more inking around our fabric quote on our wood slice, and then that makes this project complete. Let's move on to project number 2. So for this project, I'm using 4 fabrics. Now the top and the bottom fabric came from Hobby Lobby. I can give you a link to something similar for the bottom one, and from Etsy, and the 2 middle fabrics are from JubileeFabrics.com. I'll have links to those. I made a pattern here. It's 11 inches tall, 7.5 inches wide. There are 2 sizes, but I've messed with this larger size a couple of years ago on a pumpkin, and I want to kind of do a shorter fat size. I'm going to call these petals throughout this project because that's the word I seem to want to use, but it kind of looks like an eyeball. Now, each of these designs, you cut 5 petals, and you can use 3 fabrics, 4 fabrics, 5 fabrics, 1 fabric, doesn't matter, but I wanted to do 4 to kind of do like a patchwork process, and for each petal is going to have 3 different fabrics, and on the pattern those dashed lines is kind of where shows you where to glue your pieces of fabric together. Okay, don't worry, I'm going to show you. So 4 fabrics. I needed to devise kind of a little puzzle here, and I wanted to make it so that all of my fabrics, there was no same fabric touching its own kind. You know what I'm saying? So every way I made this, when you put it all together, every fabric is touching a different fabric. Do you know what I mean? Even when you wrap it around, no 2 same fabrics are touching each other. So 5 columns, 3 because that's 5 petals, and then 3 down because 3 fabrics per petal. So the easiest way I knew like how many to cut out is I wrote down all my fabric types, and now I'm counting on my little puzzle how many I need, like how many knit, how many stripe, how many fuzzy, how many plaid. Now, if I am doing this petal with 3 pieces of fabric per petal, 5 petals, that should be 15 pieces of fabric, right? So if I count all these up, and we are lucky, it came to 15 pieces. So our petal is 11 inches tall again, 7.5 inches wide. And so for the width, I'm just going to move it up to 8 inches. Okay, make it easy. For the height, if you divide that by 3, it would make each piece 3 3/4, but let's move that to 4 inches tall. All right, just for ease. And so each of our pieces of fabric need to be 4 inches tall, 8 inches wide, and all this will be on the instructions on the printable. Okay, so here are my fabric pieces all cut, all 4 patterns, 4 inches tall, 8 inches wide. There is excess fabric, and I did that to accommodate for our pattern. We want too much fabric versus not enough. So now what I'm doing, I've done some already off camera. I'm going to work on this last row of my column, which is a fuzzy, a knit, and a plaid. So you're going to place your 2 pieces together if you're a gluer, and you're going to making sure the edges are even, and you're going to glue across. I'm going to go ahead and sew those 2 pieces together. Now, as you've probably noticed, I'm using 2 pieces of fabric per section. That's because my fuzzy fabric was kind of see-through. My other fabric was a little bit thin. So I decided to do 2 per section, but you do not have to. Now, also, if you're a sewer, you're going to see where I come to the end. I don't backstitch here. I don't need to worry about that because when we hook it all together, it's going to hook it all together, if you know what I'm saying. All right, so now once you have those 2 pieces sewn together, open it up, those of you who are gluers, and make sure your seam is toward the back, and then lay your pieces right side together, and then go ahead and glue again at the top. I'm going to go ahead and pin it together, and I will sew it off camera. You're also going to notice here that I have excess fabric hanging off of the edge here. It's not straight, nothing like that. You don't need to worry about that, because when our 3 pieces of sections are sewed or glued together and we lay our petal on top and cut it out, all the side stuff goes away. All right, so here's our 3 pieces together. Our seams are on the back side. Our right sides are showing up. You're going to place your petal on here and try to place it where your dash lines kind of meet your seams as close as possible. My seams don't line up perfectly when I put all the pieces together. I don't care about that. It gives it a fun, whimsy touch. Go ahead and pin your petal pattern on to our fabric. Or your fabric, my fabric's already on here, and go ahead and cut that out. And why I wanted to call this a petal, I don't know, it was better than an eyeball. All right, once you cut that out, take it out, and this is what you should have, all right, if you're using multiple fabrics. Here's another piece ready to go. My seams are to the back. Okay, flip it open to the right side, and then we're going to go ahead again, lay our pattern piece on top, and then we're going to go ahead and cut that out. All right, and again, you could use just 1 piece of fabric for this. If you do, you don't have to worry about piecing and sewing together. Just use your petal piece and cut out 5 pieces, 5 patterns, nice and easy. All right, well, I've got all my pattern pieces together now, so I'm going to have to come back to my puzzle piece. Here's 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. There it is, number 5. Coming back to my puzzle piece, and I'm going to lay them in the order now to put my pumpkin together, because now we're going to go ahead and start sewing long ways on our petal pieces so that we get our round pumpkin together. So you're going to lay right sides together, all right? Going to sew long ways this way, but what you need to do is at the top of each piece you sew together, leave about a 1/2 inch or an inch opening. You're going to start gluing or sewing down a 1/2 inch to an inch. I left an inch opening. A 1/2 inch actually is sufficient, but either one will work. I'm going to go ahead and glue and sew. I'll sew off camera, but I'm going to glue so that you gluers can see what I'm doing. And as you see here, I'm gluing right down to the edge. And as I come down to the bottom, make sure you glue all the way down to that tip. We want that tip closed off and glued. But remember, we're leaving that little opening at the top. Okay, so here I am just sewing a little bit for you. I'll just sew a tiny bit, but I wanted to show the gluing process so you could see. Get this sewing part done. Again, I left that little bit at the top, and I'm going to come clear to the tip at the bottom, right? That's where I'll backstitch for you sewers. Now I'm backstitching. This is what it looks like when it's all done. You can see my areas don't line up. I'm okay with that. I'm going to consult my pattern piece, and I'm going to lay my next petal on top of my previous petal, making sure my edges are all even. I'm going to come down about an inch because that's how I started, and I'm gluing right close to that edge all the way down. You could use hot glue for this if you want. And you can come in a little bit. I'm just saying to glue or sew really close to that edge so you get maximum fabric for your pumpkin. But you can come in a little bit further. You know, most seam allowances are about a 1/2 inch. And a seam allowance means, for those of you who are gluers, is how far down or how far in you come to glue. All right. Now I'm taking my next piece, consulted my puzzle map. I'm laying it together on the piece I just glued or sewed down, right? And I'm going ahead and gluing this down. And we're going to do the same process all the way through all our 5 petals, and making sure as you come to the bottom, you're gluing or sewing clear down to the bottom. We don't want any kind of opening down there. All right, coming to our last piece here, gluing that down. And again, for you sewers, as you come down and sew around those edges, I am backstitching down at that bottom part of the pumpkin, because before we didn't backstitch when we added our fabrics together, but now as we're sewing the pumpkin together, we want to backstitch so it's nice and good. So this is what we look like with all 5 pieces kind of in a cup, and we're going to come around to that first and last segment here and get that glued or sewn together. And hopefully this is all understandable for you. I actually kind of dreaded doing this voiceover part because I'm like, I really can't mess this up. You guys have to understand what I'm doing since we're messing with so many pieces of fabric. So hopefully between how I'm explaining it and what you're seeing, it's understandable. If you have any questions, please comment. If you don't want to try this, it's too much, then just do one fabric for all your 5 pieces. And when you do that, you're going to glue or sew together at the end once you cut out all your 5 pieces, just as we're doing here. So here I'm just kind of sewing that first and last piece of pumpkin together. Again, instructions are on that free printable on my blog if it helps to read it too, if you need to see, visual read and watch the video. So here all my segments are sewn together. I've got an opening at the top. We're going to go ahead now and turn it inside out. Your bottom should be completely closed off. If you glued it and you see like a little hole or something there, it's not quite glued all the way together at the bottom, before you turn it back wrong side out and glue it a little bit more so it's all together, and then turn it right side out, and then go ahead and stuff your pumpkin. All right, I want to add segments now. This is optional. I'm going to take these doll needles you can get at Walmart. I use these because they have a nice eye opening here for our crochet thread. I like the crochet thread because it's thicker and more sturdy. So when I put this crochet thread through my needle at the end, one side of the thread, I'm going to kind of bend it, fold it there, and I'm going to take both of those pieces together and make a knot. All right, and I'm going to do that like 4 or 5 times. I want a great big knot here at the end of my thread so that it does not come out the bottom of our pumpkin. The other end of the thread is shorter and just kind of hanging through our needle. I'm going to come through the center of our pumpkin on the inside and poke it out the back toward that intersection on the bottom of the pumpkin and pull it all the way through till your knot touches the pumpkin. Then you're going to bring that thread up and around over your pumpkin in between your seams that you glued or sewed together. And then you're going to come back through the center again, through all that stuffing down to the bottom. Make sure you don't come out the same hole that you did. Kind of keep your holes close together, but don't keep coming out the same hole or you're going to make a big hole and that knot's going to come through. Once you come out the bottom, go around your pumpkin again to the next spot between the seams, wrap it around through, down through the center again. So you're basically coming in through the center, out the bottom, and wrapping around your pumpkin through the seams. And you're going to do this 5 times because we have, 5 segments of our pumpkin, right? So again, you're going to go through the center, out the bottom, and wrap it around the outside of your pumpkin between your seams and back in through the center over and over again till you get all 5 segments completed. Now, when you finish your last segment, your needle's hanging out the bottom, right? So I'm going to go back into the pumpkin from that bottom, okay, and pull it to the top. So now we're doing the opposite. And then I'm going to take that needle again through the top. I'm going to come out the bottom. I'm going to make a little stitch here and then come back through the top again. This is just to secure our string for our segments so they stay nice and tight. Now, once I come back up through the top that last time, I'm putting my needle under one of the strings of a segment here. I'm going to wrap it around that string twice, and I'm going to end up with a little loop in my hand, and then I'm going to take that needle through that loop twice, pull it tight in a knot, and cut off the excess. Now let's move on to some leaves for our pumpkin. I'm starting out with 2 pieces of fabric for each leaf. One is a muslin and one matches the fabric on my pumpkin. And I've got a piece of fleece here. You can use fleece, batting, felt, doesn't matter. And I started out just cutting the fleece the same size as the leaf, but now I'm going to cut it down a 1/4 inch shorter all the way around. There is a pattern with the pumpkin pattern, the free printable, and what you'll do is just layer your batting, fleece, felt, whatever between your 2 layers. If you're a gluer, your fabric layers, and glue it together. I sewed mine, so I sewed around the leaf and then through the center, and then I made some cute little like arrow lines here. I made 2 of these, and on the back side of both of them, I have 1 piece of different fabric that matches my pumpkin. All right, now if you're a gluer and you know how to hand sew, you can do some little stitching around it. You can see how I kind of did it on the leaf in the lower right corner there. That looks perfectly cute as well. All right, and now I'm just taking my finger along the edges of the fabric leaves and just fraying them. So this is what that looks like. And then set those aside. Let's work on the stem, and I'm going to use some of this macrame cord from Dollar Tree. You could use thin rope or whatever you want. And basically what I did is I just I wanted my pieces about 14, 16 inches long, somewhere in there, and I just kind of wrapped around and around and around till I got like 18 pieces of thread. You could cut them all individually, or 18 pieces of cord. And then once I did that, I had to kind of cut my loops on both sides. But, you know, like I said, you can do it individually. And on one end, I'm taking another piece of short string, and I'm just going to tie it front and back around that a couple of times so it's nice and, you know, secure, and to make a little knot. I'll let that excess hang off. All right. What we're going to do is like make a braided stem, and then I'm going to divide my strings out to 6 pieces per section, 3 sections, 6 pieces. And then I'm going to use, this is just some 18 gauge wire. I don't think it really matters what gauge you use, but I'm going to tuck it under that piece that I tied around the top and just fold the top over and make a loop so it kind of goes around that top string I tied around so it's secure. I'm going to keep that wire in the center of my string, and I'm going to braid all these 3 pieces together, but keeping that one wire in the same group of threads that you started with, and just braid it all the way down. And your braid's going to look funny, but you can fix that later. And then once you come to the end, just kind of cut off that excess wire, and then I'm taking another piece of that macrame cord and I'm tying it around the bottom in a knot. Kind of keep that together. And remember, my strings are all like wonky because the way I cut them originally, and I'm just going to cut off the end to make it even. Now what I want to do, this is what it kind of looks like. I want to add a little bit more macrame cord at the edge where that wire's folded down, just to make that whole top more secure. Because this is the top we're going to add glue on and tuck down into the center. It kind of gives me a nice big knot to glue down into the center of our batting and stuff there. And I'm going to hold that up for a minute, and I'm going to add glue out and around so I can add moss to cover that opening there. Okay. Now, as I'm adding the moss, my stem isn't quite sitting straight. So I've just got a little piece of stick here, you know, those bags of Dollar Tree sticks you can get, and I'm gluing it right down next to the stem there. The stem will glue to the side of the stick, and then I'll add some glue on top so I can cover it with moss. All right, now, remember earlier I told you I give you a quick little instruction in case you're new here, how I print it onto fabric. This is using an inkjet printer. I don't know about a laser printer, but basically you just take a piece of typing paper, you spray adhesive down, you lay your fabric on it and spread it out nice and smooth. You cut off any excess fabric or any excess sticky paper that's exposed, and then you run it through your printer, and then when it's done, you can just peel it off here just like this. There's no sticky on the back of your fabric. And then I've got a pumpkin here I cut using my xTool M1 laser, but you could use anything you want here. If you want to just cut a tag out of some foam board, that will work fine. And I traced it onto my pumpkin, the back of the fabric, and I'm just going to cut it a little bit shorter so I see my pumpkin around the edges. I'm going to use some Dixie Belle chalk paint in the color drop cloth to paint my pumpkin. Off camera, I've already sewed around my fabric with some orange thread, kind of like we did in our last project. Once the paint's dry, I'm going to go ahead and glue this to the front of the pumpkin. I'll have a link down below to my xTool M1 videos if you missed those, because that is a great handy tool to work with. And now I'm going to take my leaves. You can see how it looks here. I use my vintage photo ink to just kind of add some color around the edge, and you can see what it looked like kind of with and without that coloring. And I'm going to ink around the quote a little bit on our pumpkin. And then I've got a button here. I don't like empty buttonholes, so I'm just taking some thin twine and I'm just, you know, wrapping them through the buttonholes. I'll cut off the excess. And then we're going to go ahead and start gluing down our leaves. Now, there's not much. This is basically it for our pumpkin because I really wanted the patchwork to do the talking. Gluing the leaves down right up against that stem. And then I've got a piece of string here. I just kind of tied a little knot with a loop in one end so I can glue the loop down into next to the leaves there. And I left the knot so I could have that to kind of glue my pumpkin down onto and then onto the pumpkin on the pumpkin, and let little strings hang down like it's a little tag, obviously. Glue my button to the top of my little wood pumpkin, and that makes this project complete. Let's move on to project number 3. For this project, my friend Kim, craftingwithkimber.com, you know it, we came together again because we wanted some cute little lace-up type pumpkin. And this is the kit you would receive. I'll have a link down below in the description box for you. This is really fun. It's really simple. I love how it came out. So the first thing I'm going to use Waverly wax, antique wax mixed with water, and I'm just going to stain my pumpkin first because when I paint over the top with the light color and I sand and distress it off camera, some of that staining is going to peek through. And I would do this front and back so that the back is finished off. Okay, so I'll stain all 3 pieces front and back, and then when I use my lighter color paint, I'll paint front and back as well. Once I do this, I'm going to come back to the top with a full strength Waverly Antique Wax and darken that stem a little bit. And I've also kind of stained the 2 leaves that came with the kit off camera. I'm using Dixie Belle chalk paint in the color Drop Cloth, and I'm going to come in on the pumpkin, as I explained earlier, and paint that front and back. I went back in a little bit darker all the way around with that Waverly Antique Wax. As you can see, there's kind of a halo around each piece just to really kind of darken those edges a little bit. I'm not going to paint the leaves. I'm going to leave them kind of that, you know, distressed, or once I sand it, distressed antique color, and leave them that brown shade. I would do 2 coats of this paint front and back. And then once that's done off camera, as I've said 2 or 3 times now, I think, so I bet you know what I'm going to say, I distress it using my electric sander. All right, here's what it looks like all distressed. You can see how everything looks, how that kind of dark stain came through front and back, distress the leaves, and now we're ready to go. All right, so what I want to do is I'm going to use some of this macrame cord again from Dollar Tree, and you can lace this up any way you want it. This cord is a little bit thicker, so I put some tape on the end, and I'm going to start on the middle piece, the bottom 2 holes, and I'm going to lace from the front to the back. I'm just going to do one side at a time. I'm going to jump across to the right pumpkin segment, the bottom hole, and lace from the front to the back. All right. And now I'm going to pull the string so my 2 pieces are only about, you don't want them close together. You want them about, a ½ inch apart. Okay, so that it stands kind of in an angle there, like a curve. All right, like this. All right, and then I'm going to come up straight up to the top 2 holes on the back side and lace that through the front. And I've done it on both sides. Again, you can lace this however you want. If you want to lace it in an X pattern or whatever you want. And then at the top, both of my pieces come through the front. I'm just going to make a cute little bow to hold it together on both sides. And it's a little wobbly, but not much because our seam between the 2 pumpkins, our opening, is only about ½ inch. It's not bad. I'm going to cut off some excess twine here on our bow, and I'm going to smush the ends. And then once that's done, just to show you, once you set it up, you'll have a nice little curve here, and it holds nicely. It looks like it's a little wobbly, but it's not. Now I am making some leaves here, just like we did in our last project. I just used that same pattern, but I cut it down a little smaller. I wanted to add like some oranges to this. So if you're a gluer, just like we did 2 pieces of fabric and a piece of felt, batting, or fleece in the center and glue it together. I'm going to glue it together just to kind of tack it, and then off camera I will sew around my leaves, just around the edge. I don't do the design in the middle or anything. But if you're a gluer, glue the whole thing together. And if you're a sewer, you don't even have to glue. I just kind of gluing and sewing. This is what it looks like sewn all the way around, because I kind of want creams and oranges. And then what I'm going to do is just add some moss at the top. I'm making sure that anything I glue down is only on the 3 pieces. I don't want to glue anything that would glue the top 3 pieces of wood together, if you know what I mean. I'm making sure that I glue everything down separate so that my 3 pieces remain separate as I'm gluing. So I just kind of add a leaf at the bottom, a little moss over the top, another leaf at the top of the moss, and then glue my wood pieces down that came with the kit. As you can see here, I'm gluing some more moss down. I make sure I don't glue my leaves to both pieces or all 3 pieces of wood. We want those to stay separate. Again, I'm coming to the left side, gluing some moss down, and then I'm going to come in the center and glue down some little pit berries. And again, my little mesh tubing here, I tie a knot in the center and glue that down. I've got some like little pumpkins and some pine cones that came off a pick. I think all these were like from Joann's. I'm going to glue some of these in, just whatever you want, little picks and berries and little pumpkins and, you know, acorns, whatever you want on here. Pine cones, anything like that. Just, you know, how you like it. But again, I'm kind of going with creams and oranges and brown tones for this one. And then I picked up this from Hobby Lobby. I like how it looks. And I'm going to pick off some of the kind of orangey brown tones a little bit here. And then I've got some wired jute cord from Dollar Tree. And I twirled it around a paintbrush. Left the center kind of straight so I could glue that down. I'll go ahead and get that down first. Right in the center. And then I'll glue my little thingies here down. I don't know what they're called. Can't remember. Not looking at the tag on the on the pick. Glue those down in there. Give it a little texture. And then again, print it onto some fabric. Now I just cut this in a tag shape, and I'm gluing a piece of like thicker material behind it to make it stiff. And then I'll sew around the edges, and we'll glue it on kind of like this. And I sewed around it in orange. And I sewed it. The front tag is wonky off the back tag. I don't care. You could glue it to a piece of foam board if you want it stiffer, whatever. And I'm using that Distress Oxide ink and Vintage Photo and kind of inking around the edges there. And then I lay a big twine bow in the center there, glue that on, and lay some moss over the top of that. And then I'm going to glue my tag down over that whole ensemble in the center, moving things down around as I need to. I'm going to kind of crinkle that tag up and glue it to the center a little bit. And then I have a button. This just came from like scrapbooking days with some cute numbers on it. I'm going to ink around the edges of those, add some twine to the center because you know I don't like open holes on my buttons. And I'll cut off the excess, kind of knot it in the back, cut off the excess. I'm going to glue that down at the top of the tag. Really cute. Perfect, perfect. And then I have some of this shimmer spray. You all know I love to use it. It's called Glitter Dust. I'll have a link down below for Etsy for you, and I'll just shimmer it off camera. Now, I'm a little, not bad, but a little top heavy on the front of my pumpkin with all of the stuff I put on there. It does sit upright and a nice curve like I want it to, but off camera, I go ahead and add like a square block to the back of the center at the bottom. It gives me a little bit more stability, and that makes this project complete. So I hope you like all of the pumpkins that we came up with today. Leave me a comment down below. I really love to know what you thought about the patchwork pumpkin. It's a little bit different. I think it turned out really super fun. But let me know also which pumpkin you would love to make for this fall season. Please give this video a thumbs up. It just really helps my channel to grow. And if you walked in here for the first time and you're just checking things out and you're digging what you saw, make sure before you click off, you hit that subscribe button and notification bell so you don't miss out on another video from me. And I have all the links down below to everything I mentioned throughout this video. Make sure you go get yourself a Crafting with Kimber lace-up pumpkin kit. Before I go, I'm going to leave you with one final thought. In this life, you can probably most definitely say that your path has been full of twists and turns, and you can probably most definitely say that sometimes things just don't turn out the way you would have hoped. Maybe that's you in this moment. The journey you're on seems to have taken a sidestep onto some unknown path as you approached a fork in the road. You have not imagined this particular direction in your life. Currently, you may be feeling a little tired, a little weak, a little less on faith, but on the horizon is a promise for you. It's a promise of a new day brimming with hope. It's a day that you must look forward to. It's a day that your faith will rise up and find new meaning as God leads you to that ever-blessed mountaintop. It's a day when there will be joy for the morning. But in order to get to this day, you must be willing to leave behind what the enemy's trying to make you carry. You can't allow the enemy to steal your joy. You can't allow the enemy to take your strength or your hope, and you certainly can't allow the enemy to take your faith. You need to allow your faith to power up. Push the line of the enemy back and allow God to work that next step for you as you run for the end game. Sometimes in order to see that finish line, it's easier to take the race by setting your vision on each individual route marker versus just straining your eyesight up ahead, trying to see that black and white checkered finish line. You must be willing to fight for what God has promised you. You must be willing to hang on to every ounce of hope that He's given you, and you must be willing not to go down into that deep, dark hole. God promises that He's always with you. He will never leave you. He will never forsake you. And those, my friend, are fighting words. Those are words to cling to. Those are words of grace and mercy and love. They are words that will forever stay with you. And a love that strong for you that promises to never leave your side should encourage you to keep moving forward one day at a time. If you're in that state of your life right now where it feels bleak and your promise seems as though it will never come and nothing in your life feels good, don't push your life away. Don't push God's promise away. Don't allow this phase to set you back and keep you from trusting God. That's the exact goal the enemy wants for you. Don't let him have it. Don't let him take your promise from God away. This is your moment to push past the pain and jump the hurdle to the next route marker in your race. Keep striving to succeed in the promise God has for you. God spoke it to your heart, and his word never goes void. Don't give up your hope in God. Do not quit. Continue calling of the name of the Lord. Keep fighting, keep praying, keep leaning on God's strength, and do not doubt what God has for you. Make your commitment to God be your focus as you take it one marker at a time and lean on his strength to finish this race, because you don't know exactly when everything will be aligned just as God desires it to be. And you don't know when exactly the right moment God has for you, and you don't know when he'll stop and finally say, "Now, my child, look up. Your promise is fulfilled." I thank you for sharing your time with me, and I'll talk with you again soon. Bye.